to the world it's not fun. It's not something that, I aspired for. I don't want to be known as a gay tennis player. This is who I am, and I want it to be a non-issue. And for people to say, well, they need to come out because it's for the greater good, well, who are you to say, because you're not famous. It's difficult for women because they're assumed to be lesbians when they are involved in a sport. I've never heard of a report. I actually asked reporters, did you ever ask a male athlete if they're gay? And they never have. But they feel perfectly fine to ask women that. What we need to remember is that homophobia doesn't hurt just the gay athletes, it hurts the straight athletes. Because there are a lot of girls that I know about in the States that don't get involved in sports because they don't want to be called dykes or queers or lesbians or whatever. Because people, again, are assuming, or it's still used in a negative connotation. So homophobia hurts everybody across the board, and that's what people don't realize.
I think it's an interesting point that you made about female straight athletes in America and not wanting to be assumed that they were gay. Do you think it's easier for a woman in sport to come out than a man?
I think so, yes.
Why?
I think there's a thing about men that have some sort of attraction to lesbian women. I remember there was a group of lesbians who used to meet up regularly in a local pub of mine when I lived in Woking, and there was no problem. They could be themselves, and the men around enjoyed it and made some silly comments, and the women, I don't think, were particularly worried about it. Whereas I think if it was a group of men doing something similar, the men, certainly in the bar, would feel uneasy. And I think that's the same in sport. I think it's a lot easier, personally, for women to come out. And I think it's a lot of it is the macho bit of male sport, especially things like football and rugby and physical sports in that respect.
She said in there as well that being gay to the world is not very easy. Can you understand what she means by that, Ed?
Yes, because no one wants to be defined by their sexuality. And the problem is, once you tell someone what your sexuality is, unfortunately, people always think of that first and foremost. And so for someone like her, who was one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen, she doesn't want to be remembered simply as being a gay tennis player. She wants to be remembered as one of the greatest tennis players of all time. So
if a footballer was to come out, a Premier League footballer was to come out, do you think that they would then be defined by their sexuality for the rest of their career?
I fear so, yes, at the moment. And I think that is inevitably what would happen. The terrible thing is, it really is going to be the one thing that's going to happen at some stage, unless, of course, the football organisations such as the FA start working towards creating a safer environment for people to be happy about coming out. But unless they do that, I'm afraid that's going to be the problem.
I'm a gay Arsenal season ticket holder, says somebody on the text, and the non-stop homophobic chants directed at a certain ex-player would not be tolerated if it highlighted the fact that he is black. Sickening. Do you think that there are double standards between race and sexuality?
Possibly. Certainly, yes. If a black player got the same level of abuse that the player that we know they're talking about was getting, then there would be uproar in the media and in football, and the football authorities and the FA would certainly be looking at that. The fact that this particular player is black as well, I don't think anybody worries about that. I think they're just highlighting on the rumours that he may be gay.
Peter's in London now, and we've kind of touched on this, Ed, but I think it is going to be a common point that crops up is should there be such thing as a gay football team? Does it not perpetuate prejudice in itself? Would you have a black Asian team to combat racial prejudice?
I would love for there not to be a need for a gay football league. I would love for us to be able to play happily in straight leagues where players could play the game they love without any abuse for being gay. Sadly, at the moment, that simply can't happen. Yes, it does perpetuate it, but we can't, as a small club, do very much to influence the footballing community. That's why we keep calling upon, repeatedly, people like the FA to try and take a firmer stance, because it's got to be from the top down that we've got to tackle this. Us deciding to play in a straight league is going to have some minor influence in our part of the country, but it's not going to sway people's minds or challenge people's opinions. The FA have got to start leading the way by educating countrywide, so that people understand that being gay is an absolute irrelevance. At the moment, sadly, the approach towards homosexuality and being gay is not being viewed in the same way as the attitude towards race was 20 years ago.
What Does it surprise you, talking about the football community then, and the FA needing to educate people, does it surprise you that out of all the requests we put in, all the texts, all the emails, whatever, all the phone calls, that we only got one footballer, Clark Carlisle at Burnley, who I know anyhow, so there was a kind of in there. But does it surprise you that out of everybody we tried to get in touch with, only one footballer was prepared to stick his head over the parapet and talk about sexuality in the game?
I'm astonished you managed to get one person to speak to you about it, because the fear is such that people are concerned, even by talking about the subject, they're going to be labelled in a particular way as being either gay or gay-friendly. And I think he's particularly brave to speak out, and we're glad that you have the personal connection with him, perhaps encourage him to do so. I hope he doesn't suffer any consequences as a result of it. But players are concerned, I'm sure, about the impact of them coming out would have amongst fans, amongst their fellow teammates, amongst their sponsors. And at the moment, I can perfectly understand why people would be reluctant even to speak about the topic.
See, the whole point of doing this documentary is to try and find if there was one reason in particular that is stopping a footballer to come out. You've touched on some of fans, players, commercial aspects. Martina Navratilova was very strong on the commercial aspect. I spoke to the head of a sports marketing agency called Hill and Knowlton. He was in no doubt whatsoever. The only thing that people get deals on is talent. There is no way a person would lose out on commercial deals if they were gay. And in fact, Gareth Thomas said to me, "I've got more offers coming in than I ever had before I came out."
I think it's down to, if you like, the mentality within football, and the sort of the aggression that you get in football. I mean, I've been watching football since the 70s, and obviously you can remember some awful situations of violence and sort of hatred towards opposition fans. And of course there was a lot of problems with black players, and especially teams that had a lot of black players. That was a lot of problem. That luckily, thankfully, has been eradicated. But what you haven't done is eradicate the aggression, almost sometimes the yobbish behaviour of football supporters. And that's something that I've always disliked in football, even though I've been involved in football and have been watching football for a very long time, is the aggression at times towards opposite players, supporters, and the such like. And I think that is something that will be a problem if a player, and the problem is there's always got to be the first one. It's not like you can suddenly get a whole team coming out. So you're going to get the one player. Now, let's just say a Manchester United player came out. I don't think there'd be too many problems at Old Trafford. Yeah. So he'd have 76 or 70,000 people who would have no problem with him. But, of course, travelling away, there'd be all sorts of problems. John Terry had well-publicised problems early this season. No problems at Stamford Bridge. But, of course, every game after that, he went to an away match, all the supporters gave him jip. Now, whether or not he had any problems with that people do say it affected his game. But I think if a player who did come out, I think there would be real problems for that player, because especially in some of the large stadiums, if you get 35,000 Spurs supporters having a go, as they probably would do with the player that we mentioned earlier. But
we're looking at it, aren't we, from a sort of a normal human being point of view, and sports stars in some ways aren't normal human beings, because once they get to that level, they're trained to block out everything that comes from the crowd. And talking to Gareth Thomas and talking to Donald Cusack, the stuff that comes out of the crowd is more often than not water off a duck's back, because they are used as sports people to, when they go away from home, getting abuse for whatever reason it is.
Yes, but I mean that doesn't mean necessarily that they should have to be subjected to it. I mean, that's the problem. And the difficulty, I think, is that if a player came out now, there would still be that sort of aggression tended towards them by the supporters, and that's because people need educating. And at the moment, I'm afraid to say that we're, in terms of the attitude towards gay people in this country is very similar, not as extreme as it was towards people of race 20 years ago. But we need to educate, that's the problem. And at the moment, people still think it's acceptable to be rude about gay people and abusive towards them because they think it's acceptable. And people have to learn that it simply isn't.
Do you think you're talking about a minority there? Because since last night's documentary went out, the texts and the emails and the tweets that I've got have been so positive as regarding the subject that I think we can get ourselves bogged down in focusing maybe on a minority here, and it is a minority that would chant abuse. It is a minority